serious. Police, security guards, paramedics, etc. Have you ever been called out only to realize it was a seemingly paranormal incident? What happened? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. 2 second-hand stories from my friend who used to be a security guard in the federal building in Portland, Oregon. One night, she saw what looked like someone in a dark hoodie standing by an office door at the far end of a long hallway. When she called out, the person turned to face her, but she couldn't see a face in the hood. Then it zoomed at her, covering the full length of the corridor in about a second, sort of swooshed past her and disappeared. She was standing at the end of the hall with a non-openable window behind her. A different time, she got called into work because a coworker, a huge, hulking dude she had once seen break up a fight by lifting 2 guys and smashing them together, saw something that scared him so bad he left the building without even locking up, drove home, and called in from his bed. He refused to talk about it. Among their employees, this building had a reputation for weird noises and sightings. My sister has been a nurse for about 8 years in Southern and now Northern California. Worked in hospitals, med-surg, ICU, dialysis centers, and now a hospice nurse. She has a few stories from the hospital, things like children laughing, shadows, patients claiming they saw another dead patient when they'd never met. One of the creepiest that she and the other nurses told me was about a patient complaining and scared that something was under their bed. He was older and confused, so they didn't think much of it. Checked on him, responded to the multiple calls, and just tried to make him feel better. The next day, a new patient went into that room, another older person but not confused, and called to complain about something under his bed. They sort of brushed it off again after checking. The next night, a new patient in his 20s and completely coherent called crying that something kept running under his bed. They checked and found nothing, but the patient was in such distress and shaking, they moved him. Happened quite a few other times as well. They never found anything, but that was so creepy to me. Not sure if this is paranormal or not, but we live together now, and she works as a hospice nurse. Every so often, she would scream, or I'd hear her struggle, or make weird noises in the middle of the night. I'd go to check, and she'd tell me it was sleep paralysis, and explain what happened, that she saw a specific patient in her episode standing over her and growling, crying, or screaming. Always a very scary dream. The next day, the patient would die. Happened about 13 times so far. Trips me out. A guy I worked with told me about a computer programming job he had at a small bank that I think was in Salem, Oregon. He was engrossed working on some code and didn't notice people leaving for the day, but at some point he realized he was alone. But he could hear slow, irregular typing, like somebody who didn't know how to type was using one finger. He was in a groove and kept working, but eventually he had to stop and figure out what it was. After walking around and finding nobody there, he realized the sound was coming from behind a door he had never seen open. As he opened the door, the typing sound stopped, and what he found was a small closet with some boxes and forms and stuff stacked up, and on top of the boxes was an old manual typewriter like from the 1920s, no paper in it. At that point, he just closed the door and called it a night. The guy was a rather unimaginative person and also a hardcore biblical Christian. He never even reported this or asked his coworkers about it. I would have stuck a sheet of paper in the typewriter and then noped out for the night. I work security at night in a luxury condo. I actually started a little over a month ago and I already had a fair share of incidents. Alarms triggered for no apparent reason, finding unusual doors unlocked, random orbs on the cameras, doors slamming while nobody's around, elevator phone started ringing by itself. I have worked as a nurse for 7 years and have worked night shifts in 2 very old and prestigious hospitals a lot, places that have gone through most London major medical incidents in the past 200 years. One of them opened in 1100 AD. Not once have I experienced anything you would consider paranormal activity. I feel like it is worth mentioning. These are places where death has happened a lot, like more than most places, so kind of prime ghost territory. This is my experience, but very willing to hear opposing views. Temporarily security guard at a supermarket in Holland. Suddenly I get a call that there's a kid locked in one of our walk-in coolers that you need a magnetic key for to unlock. Customers and staff have heard this kid yell for help. I get my magnetic master key and open the door. Execute this bitch empty. EXE, there is nothing in the cooler. No kid, no produce, nada. We explain it away as some joke, but staff insist they heard it. Jokingly tell them they heard a ghost or some shit, and after that, I continue my shift, slightly unnerved. EMT here. One of my partners told me a story about an old fire station that used to be in use. He and his partner at the time were sleeping in the bunks, and it's pitch black for them. The fire station kinda looked like the one in Ghostbusters, so I'd say that the building dated back to the 60s. Anyway, there's no one else in the station except for them. Their mini fridge in the room cracked, and someone screamed, "Bishop, I'm not in the mood!" And then the fridge slowly closed. Another one of my partners said that they had a situation that it was at a similar time around the top. All of the firefighters were sound asleep. Sometimes in our bays, garage, main doors to the station, we keep the back doors to our ambulances closed. At the time, my partner stated that they heard a loud thump, went to go inspect what happened, and they found the back doors open to the truck and their equipment, jump bag, on the floor. I was a medic in the army, and I was ordered to babysit a couple of soldiers in their barracks room because of poltergeist activity they were experiencing. The two soldiers apparently hadn't slept in a while and complained of objects being thrown at them. The command sent me because they had no clue where to go on the issue and figured they could have a rotating guard until they figured something out. A few days later, they just moved the guys to a different room. Simple. I was in the army, but this story seems right for here. We were on a night patrol close to this weird place up in the hills. Didn't make us feel good inside, but couldn't tell why. During this patrol, one of our squads started reporting movement. When we all got to their position, they all looked like sheets. The CO of the squad was holding one end of the radio without it being connected, and to this day, everyone in that squad swears that they heard a girl's voice through that radio. About 3 miles down the hill was a village that we'd visited before, and we had children watch us move to that position before, but we couldn't find anyone during that night that wasn't one of us. I had saved some spooky stuff. Here's one of them. Not my story though. User, my name's not Chase story. I had just finished my initial military training, basic, AIT, a few other classes, and got sent to my first duty station. My unit was at NTC for pre-deployment training, so I met up with the rear echelon. I get issued my room and spent 3 very disturbed days and nights in the barracks with weird stuff happening, like gear not where I left it, locked drawers being opened, the microwave turning on by itself, shit like that. My roommate, who I knew throughout training, showed up on the 4th day, and I told him something along the lines of, "Watch your shit. Someone's been effing with my stuff and I don't know who." So the 4th night comes around, and myself and my roommate secure our room and gear and go to bed. Gotta be up at 05:30 for PT, so it's an early night. We lock all our stuff and go to bed. I woke up around 0100 because my blanket had fallen to the ground and I was cold, which was weird because we were in the south in summer, so it's always hot. I hopped down to get my blanket and I noticed my armoire is open, so I open the lock, close it, lock it, and get back to bed. I fell back asleep pretty easy, but I woke up again at about 02:30 and all my stuff and my roommate's stuff is thrown around the room. I wake up my roommate and he's pissed because someone is effing with us and can't figure out who it is. We clean it up, lock our stuff, and go back to bed. I woke up a 3rd time at 03:37 and we're not alone. I can hear my roommate snoring, so I know it's not him. I sat up and saw someone in the little kitchenette area with the fridge open looking in it. I was freezing again. I was about to say something as the soldier turned around. My eyes had a moment to adjust to the bright light, and then I started to recognize gear, like the L-shaped flashlight on his shoulder, his Alice pack with magazine holders and canteens, boots, and fatigues. This dude was combat ready. As my eyes reached his face, he turned a bit, and I could see it. Half his head and helmet were gone, blown off by the looks of it. I'm scared shitless at this point. He closed the fridge, walked across the room, keeping his bright green eyes on me, opened my front door, and walked out. As he exited, he turned back around and said to me, "Be safe." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't wake my roommate up. I just sat up in bed for about 2 hours till I had to get ready for PT. 06:30 rolls around, so everyone is outside the barracks in formation, getting ready to start PT, and acting first sergeant says, "Hey, not Chase, you good? Looks like you seen a ghost." I replied with, "Negative, I'm fine, first sergeant, good to go." About halfway through PT, He comes up to me and asks me what's wrong because I'm visibly shaken up. I told him I'm fine, I just couldn't sleep last night. A few others asked if I was okay and I just lied and said I was fine. I really wasn't, and they could see that, but they let me be. After PT ended, the acting first sergeant pulled me to the side and told me to speak freely, openly, and with all confidentiality and off the record. What is wrong? I told him that if I told him what happened, he would think I'm batshit crazy. He assured me it was off record and once again said, "Talk to me. You seriously look like you've seen a ghost." That got an awkward chuckle out of me, and I began to tell him my story, and when I got to the part about his head, the acting first sergeant lost his shit. "Who the F put you up to this? This is not funny," etc., etc. He smoked me for about 30 minutes, maybe do push-ups, mountain climbers, stuff like that, all while yelling at me that I'm a piece of shit. Finally, after about 30 minutes of that, he says, "Look at me in the eye and swear on everything that you love that you're not lying to me." I told him I was not lying, it effing happened. So he says, "Follow me." So I do. We get to the command office, which I have never been in, and they were obviously locked. He takes me behind 3 locked doors in 3 rooms I had never stepped foot in, and when he opened the last door, I saw it. It gave me chills. It still gives me chills, but plain as day, there is the soldier's portrait behind the commander's desk. I froze and said, "That's him." Acting first sergeant, the guy who assigned me to that room, told me who it was. He was a corporal in the unit on my unit's first deployment to Iraq, and he died in an IED attack that took off part of his head. I was the first soldier to be assigned that room since it belonged to the deceased corporal. He forgave me, and I forgave him, and he told me some stories about who this guy was. I deployed with that unit just a couple of months later and spent 12 months fighting in that shithole. I nearly died, I don't know how many times. My vehicle got hit with IEDs and rockets, and it always made me think of that corporal. I survived more things than most people can imagine, and I always felt like the corporal was keeping an eye out for me. Not everyone in my unit was as lucky as me. 3 from my company didn't get to come home. I was working night shifts as a security guard from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a 2-story office building that had probably 50 to 80 workers, all in cubicles during the day. It was only myself there during the night. I was stationed at the front door where their switchboard desk is, and I do a patrol of the entire building every 2 to 3 hours. I always heard weird thuds and people walking. I even checked to see if it was right. Usually I'd hear something around 3:15 a.m. I ended up getting used to it since nothing was ever there. The weirdest thing that happened was on my 3rd patrol, roughly around 3:30 a.m. As I walked on the 2nd story, I noticed some of the ceiling tiles were gone and 2 of the roof hatches were completely opened. I didn't notice any of this on my earlier patrols. When I told the morning staff, they had no idea why. Later, I talked to the other guard who used to work there for years, older gentleman and religious. He's also noticed many weird things, but he didn't want to talk about it. Other things have happened, such as computer screens coming on, coffee machines turning on randomly, radios randomly turning on. A couple times I'd sworn things were moved because it looked different from earlier patrols. It was an easy gig, but I'm sure the place was haunted by something. TLDR, worked overnight security in an office building. It was haunted. One of our fire stations was haunted. I left the department and they rebuilt the station, so I say was. It wasn't my normal station, but I got sent there for a month. I'm sensitive and, well, walking into that building, it just feels wrong. My full-blooded Native American friend is the only other one that felt it too. It took me 3 weeks to realize that when I was in the kitchen, I would never turn my back on the door to the bay, opposite the stove. One day, I went there at night, and as we were all sitting in the living room area set up in the bay, we all heard a distinct 2-tone whistle, but none of us did it. Another day, we were sitting in the office area. There's a big metal door between there and the bay. The 3 of us stopped talking at the same time, just as we heard a few steps from the bay, and the door opened about an inch. No one else was in the station either time. I was a corrections officer for 8.5 years at a county jail. We had an inmate commit suicide in his lockdown cell and not be found for a few hours. That unit has primarily been an ADSEG unit the entirety of the facility being open. In the years I worked there, we had 3 inmate deaths in that same cell, 2 suicides, 1 natural causes. I can't say for certain there is something there, but doing midnight head count in that unit was always a little unnerving. You get used to being watched by inmates, but that unit, it always felt like it was something else. Even when the unit was empty, you would get that feeling that something was there. New officers experienced it, veteran officers experienced it, even the maintenance guys when they went into work on a cell.